Hi everybody, today's going to be a fun one. We're going to be reacting to a video by Holy Koolaid called Why the Rest of the World Thinks Americans Are Brainwashed. Yeah, kind of an insulting title, but really fun video to watch. Real eye-opener. I'm particularly opinionated, so I don't know what I'm going to be saying today. Also, I need to talk about something else. I put out a Global Eye versus E7 video recently. Oh my God, did I get comments. They were brutal, but yeah, they had to be okay. It's all good. So I'm coming out with a corrections video in a couple of days, I guess. So stay tuned. Let's go look at the video.
There is some wild propaganda that Americans are taught and don't even realize it's propaganda. Now, I should preface this by stating that I am an American. I love my country. My family goes all the way back to Jamestown. My grandfather fought in World War II. I was born in Los Angeles. I went to university in Texas. I was raised singing the Star-Spangled Banner and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm about as American as it gets. Well, besides these guys. But I've also spent the last decade studying cults, dogma, and religious extremism, and thought control. And as someone who has lived in over a dozen countries and traveled to more than 35 of them, I've started noticing some
I think that's kind of the key. Going outside of your own country. If you've traveled the world at all, it gives you an opportunity to see how you're perceived around the world. As a Canadian, whenever I travel, I see how Canadians are perceived. I see how Americans are perceived. Also, when I go to Mexico, I see how Germans are perceived. I see how Israelis are perceived. So, we all have our internal view of how we are perceived by the world and who we really are, but it doesn't necessarily match up with reality. I don't know how he's lived in all these countries. Kind of cool.
And as someone who has lived in over a dozen countries and traveled to more than 35 of them, I've started noticing some extremely troubling forms of propaganda that Americans are taught from childhood. Things that people in free, developed democratic countries overseas find absolutely bizarre, and things that most Americans never question, because we've been marinating in it since birth. And look, every country has its own brand of propaganda. I'm not trying to pretend that America is uniquely evil here, but what makes American propaganda so effective is that most of us don't even realize it exists. We think that propaganda is something that happens in North Korea or Soviet bases, posters of dictators and state-controlled media. We don't recognize it when it's sung at football games and printed on a bumper sticker. So here are 7 forms of propaganda that you probably didn't even realize that you grew up with if you're an American.
Okay, he's talking about propaganda that we don't even know exists. I mean, I think what's happened also is the permission to lie and what Kellyanne Conway called alternate facts. We blatantly, from outside America, I guess, we blatantly see what's happening and it's reported by really legitimate sources, and then we have the president come out and say exactly the opposite of we absolutely know to be the truth. So that's propaganda, and it's coming from the highest levels. I think of the anti-vax movement, but we could clearly see the lies and the propaganda from America, from outside of America. I don't know if you're exposed to it in America as much as we are in Canada. Be interesting. Leave me your comments. I'd like to see really what that's about, because my wife and I, we keep saying, we must be living in a simulation. It's just not possible. Somebody's testing us someplace. This can't be reality. What the heck is going on? Let me give you a blatant example. Uh, People still believe that Trump wants to release the Epstein files, when in reality he's been blocking it. From day one, he said, "Oh yeah, I want to release it," but when the actual law came for him to sign, he didn't want to sign it. He's just working so hard to not move it forward. And you have, of all people, Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of defending the release of the files, and the DOJ, the Department of Justice, obviously lying about certain things. Um, so propaganda is almost become institutionalized, and people, you don't have to be good at it. You just have to sow enough doubt that people don't know what to trust anymore. And there doesn't seem to be any consequences for people just blatantly lying. I mean, we see it in Canada, we see it from the Trump administration, but we see it on Fox as well, just half truths and half truths. And also the mainstream media, you kind of see the same thing. They don't want to step on anybody's toes, and they don't want Trump to attack them publicly. So they don't go out of their way to talk about reality as it's seen elsewhere in the world.
Number one, US centric education. American history is extraordinarily short. We are talking a few centuries compared to.
Just so you know, the perception outside of America is that the American education system is very bad. It's the perception is that it's very America centrist. It doesn't have a holistic view. It it hides some of the no, not hides. It distorts some of the historical facts. Slavery, for example. What was it Kanye said? My God, slavery was a good thing because people learned trades. Oh my God, can you believe crap like that? Seriously. Another thing is the wars. Vietnam War. How is that taught in the U.S.? In Canada, it's not necessarily taught, but the way that we see it is that it's America once again imposing itself on the rest of the world because of the anti-communist move or the anti-communist rhetoric that's out there. That's another thing. You wanted to attack something. If you're in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, you want to attack someplace, you just call it communist and you want to go and free them. When in reality, we see places like Iraq, it wasn't to free anybody. It's to free the oil that really, in my humble opinion, but what do I know?
Number one, US centric education. American history is extraordinarily short. We are talking a few centuries compared to civilizations that span millennia. And yet, if you grew up in an American public school, you would think that the United States was the center of human history. Geography classes often aren't taught at all, and world history courses, when they are taught, are basically how does the rest of the planet relate to America? The Vietnam War is taught as a war for freedom. Westward expansion is framed as brave pioneers taming a wild frontier, not as the systematic displacement and genocide of indigenous peoples who've been living there for thousands of years. World War II, Americans swoop in and save the day, with little mention of the roughly 27 million Soviets who.
This is one as a Canadian, it's irritating. We were there at the beginning of World War II, 1939, and we had been there, and we were, absolutely, we got absolutely destroyed at Dieppe. We started training pilots. We were building planes. We were super involved in World War II because we saw what was going on with the German authoritarianism. America was very isolationist at the time, and only once they were attacked at Pearl Harbor was war declared on Germany and on Japan. This is something also I see, Americans that don't know who who we were fighting against in World War II. Oh my God. What's that saying? If you forget history, you're condemned to relive it. Kind of ironic in these days. Yeah, kind of ironic. Let me back up a bit.
World War II, Americans swoop in and save the day, with little mention of the roughly 27 million Soviets who died on the Eastern Front doing the bulk of the fighting against Hitler. Now, compare that to how other countries.
Oh, and actually, it's still going on today. Remember, Trump talked about nobody helping the U.S. ever. Well, the only time that Article 5 from NATO was ever used was after 9/11, and tons of countries helped out immediately. Canada lost 158 soldiers. Denmark lost more soldiers per capita than anybody. Denmark, that's the country where Trump is talking about taking over Greenland, which belongs to Denmark. It's just incredible how history is being distorted. It's a little bit like the what is it, Fahrenheit 451 or something, where history is just rewritten, so that in 100 years people will believe that Vietnam was being liberated by the Americans, and World War II was only an American war where America stepped in and saved the day at the last minute. It's kind of weird. Who knows who, they say that winners write the history books, but in this case, there's a blatant spin, propaganda. There's a blatant spin on historical facts about America. I'm sure there are historical spins in Canada as well. When I went to French elementary school, and the French in Quebec were aligned with the Hurons. So we read books about how the Iroquois were horrible and burning people alive and cutting off their noses and all kinds of stuff. And then in high school, I went to English school, and the English were aligned with the Iroquois, not with the Hurons. So I heard exactly the opposite stories. I heard all the Iroquois, they had long houses, they were wonderful. And then, so yeah, it really depends. Now, I know now it's much more balanced, thankfully. And I think we have to be respectful. And I think I'm kind of assuming that it's more balanced. Who knows? Let's go back.
Of the day, with little mention of the roughly 27 million Soviets who died on the Eastern Front doing the bulk of the fighting against Hitler. Now, compare that to how other countries teach history. In
Oh my God, am I never going to stop interrupting? There was an expression during World War II also. The Americans were willing to fight to the last Soviet.
much of Europe, kids actually learn global history. They study African kingdoms, Asian dynasties, Middle Eastern contributions to science and mathematics. They learn about colonialism for what it actually is, not heroic adventure, but exploitation. When I talk to Americans who are traveling abroad for the first time, I'm often shocked at how little they know about the rest of the world. And that's not by accident. A nation which doesn't teach its citizens about the world produces citizens who don't question their own nation's role in it.
Here's something funny. Again, kind of tragic. Most people don't know that a lot came out of the Middle East um, in terms of the thought and innovation that we use even today. The alphabet comes from the Middle East. Most words that you see that start with al are from the Middle East. Alchemy from the Middle East. Algebra from the Middle East. The Middle East also had a very rich. The Middle East also had a very rich history of stargazing and observations. So it's not just, we'll hear about the Maya from time to time because, oh my goodness, people were talking about the end of the world in 2012. But you don't hear about what happened in the Middle East. You don't hear about the Indus Valley. You don't hear about the innovations in China with their canals and their irrigation. You don't, it's too bad because the world is such a rich place, not in terms of money, but in terms of innovation and culture. And it's too bad we're really hurting ourselves. We're missing out on it.
Number 2. The Cold War binary. If you grew up in America anytime after 1950, you absorbed one of the most effective propaganda frameworks ever constructed. Communism equals evil, capitalism equals freedom. Full stop. No nuance, no discussion, just a clean binary where one side wears white hats and the other side.
When I was a kid, I watched reruns of a TV show called Bullwinkle. I think it was Bullwinkle. And he was a moose. And he would fight Boris and Natasha, who were the Russian bad guys. So at a very young age, communism was said to be the bad guy.
What they don't teach you is that during the Cold War, the United States overthrew democratically elected governments around the world simply because the governments leaned left. In 1953, the CIA helped orchestrate a coup against Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh.
Okay, so in 1953, the U.S. helped get rid of Mossadegh in Iraq. In Iran. Do you think the Iranians remember that? Do you think do you think that that's part of their thinking about the Americans? And do Americans know this at all? I saw an interview with Ted Cruz. He didn't know what the population of Iran was. It's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. You're blindly going out, believing your own little propaganda and your own lies, and you're getting just torn apart in certain cases. But we've seen this over history. How many times have populations thought they were exceptional just to be taken apart?
Because he nationalized Iran's oil industry. In 1954, the US toppled Guatemala's president, Arbenz, because his land reforms threatened the profits of United Fruit Company. In 1973, the CIA backed the overthrow of
That's literally where the word banana republic comes from. An entire country the leadership was overthrown because a banana business that was worth, zillions of dollars was going to be nationalized by the government. So the business was a strong enough lobby with the Americans, and the Americans came in and overthrew the government. It's absolutely mind blowing. And then today we hear, oh, why do we have to take care of the world? And why are we the world's police? Because you imposed yourself as the world's police for the longest time, in my humble opinion. And let's not conflate things. People will say, yeah, but Canada still underspends for NATO. Yes, yes, we have to fix that. We really do. But I don't think conflating everything in the arguments is the way to go.
Chile's Salvador Allende, a democratically elected socialist, and replaced him with Augusto Pinochet, a brutal military dictator who tortured and murdered thousands. The Congo, Brazil, Indonesia, it's all the same playbook. America claimed to be defending democracy while systematically destroying it in order to exploit country after country. This all is recent history, and this binary thinking is still alive and well. If you suggest universal healthcare in America, watch how quickly someone calls you a communist. Propose free public university education.
Communist. And even socialist is a bad word. Whereas socialism or socialist, it's a range of how socialist a country could be. And there's a joke, I like it, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. Yes, absolutely, that can happen. And that's an extreme of socialism. But I like our version in Canada of socialism. I believe in hard work and pulling your weight, but also helping your neighbor when they're in need. And this is why healthcare for everybody absolutely is a great idea. And we can do it because part of our taxes go to funding our health system. It's not the best in the world. It's not perfect, but nobody's going bankrupt because they have cancer. No, did you see the other day that poor lady who works for Uber and had to go see President Trump and to talk about the no tax on tips? And he was going, "Oh, this lady is fantastic. She gets to keep all her money." But he didn't mention that this poor grandma has to go back to work for Uber because there's no health care, and her husband has cancer, and she has to pay for it somehow. Grandmas should be allowed to stay home at some point and retire. You shouldn't lose your house because you have kidney stones. It just doesn't make sense. And once again, it comes back, I think, to this. I don't know what. Maybe I'm wrong, but there seems to be more of a win-lose mentality in America. So you have to, when you win, the other person has to lose. There can't be a win-win kind of cooperation. Um, I don't see it anyway. I might be completely wrong, but there. Okay, blood pressure. Let's move on.
Something that dozens of thriving democracies already provide, and suddenly you're a Marxist. The Cold War ended over 30 years ago, but the propaganda framework it built is still alive and kicking. If you want to start breaking free from propaganda, one of the most effective and powerful things that you can do is to expose yourself to other cultures, other perspectives, and other languages. My dad was a language teacher, and I grew up multilingual, and I can tell you firsthand that learning another language doesn't just teach you new words, it gives you an entirely different.
To pay for university, I was a language teacher as well. Oh, as a matter of fact, that's how I met my wife. What's really rich about language too is you get to see words that are the same in English, and in my case, English and French, that mean different things, or different words that mean the same thing. And it gives you an overlap of the culture. I'll give you an example. I don't know if you remember what George W. Bush said. At one point he said, there is no French word for entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is a French word. There's no English word for it. It's very mind-blowing. Very mind-blowing. And you see, I don't know if this is real though. You see videos about people that having a map held up to them and they say, name a country that starts with U or something like this, and they just can't find anything. At one point there was a lady who was they showed her a map and she's like, "I'm not very good in history." Oh my God, oh my God. But I don't know. That might be all, for clicks. Let's go on.
Lens through which to view the world, which is why I love today's sponsor, LingoPie. LingoPie takes a completely different approach to language learning compared to the ineffective methods used in most classrooms and school. Instead of memorizing vocabulary lists or slogging through dry exercises, you learn by watching real TV shows and movies from the countries where the language is spoken, immersing yourself in their culture. It is engaging and is far closer to how people naturally acquire language. If you don't recognize a word, every subtitle is clickable, so you can instantly see the translation translation and save it. LingoPie then automatically turns these words into flashcards, which you can review later. There's also an AI grammar coach that explains phrases in context and a pronunciation tool that listens to you speak and gives feedback on your accent so that you can sound more natural. The platform has over 3,000 shows and movies across 14 different languages, and you can use it on just about any device. So rather than forcing yourself to study, why not just entertain yourself and let your brain absorb the language in a way that's fun? I like it so much that I actually bought a lifetime subscription long before they ever offered to sponsor the channel. It's easily my favorite way to learn. So if you've ever wanted to learn another language or just expose yourself to different cultures and perspectives, click the link below to get a 7-day free trial plus 55% off an annual plan and go see how it works for yourself. Number 3, the land of the free myth. Americans are told from birth that the United States is the freest country on earth. It's in the songs, it's on the bumper stickers. It's baked into the nation's identity so deeply that questioning it feels almost heretical. But is it true? Well, let's look at the data.
It's weird that this isn't questioned at all. People think that the rest of the world isn't as free as America. I figure Canada's, what am I not free from? Oh yeah, okay. There's always the trolls or the conspiracy nuts that are like, oh yeah, but it's a communist country and you're not free to decide because whatever. But I mean, really, what are we not free to do in Canada that you can do in the US? I just don't see it. And as a matter of fact, with the last year and a half, 2 years, I think America's getting less and less free. Free to walk those streets without fear of being picked up. Free to go to school free to send your children to school without the fear of, you got to get your gun laws happening too. That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense in such a developed country that your number one killer of children is guns. Oh my God. Oh my God, you have to get it together. Yeah, you're free. I don't know.
Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Index, the US doesn't crack the top 50. It ranks 57th in the world, just below Sierra Leone. On the Cato Institute's Human Freedom Index, and keep in mind, the Cato Institute is a libertarian think tank, not some leftist outfit, multiple countries outrank America in both personal and economic freedom. The United States incarcerates more people per capita than almost every other country on the planet. More than China, more than Russia, Iran, or North Korea. The land of the free locks up more of its own citizens than...
Aren't there privatized jails or prisons as well? Doesn't that incentivize those prisons to kind of promote arresting people? I don't know. It just seems like an incestuous kind of relationship that maybe shouldn't be. Privatizing prisons. And also, putting people away for life for possession of cannabis. Oh my goodness. What's going on?
in almost every authoritarian regime on Earth, and a disproportionate number of them are Black and Latino. This is not what freedom looks like. It is a system designed to warehouse people. But it goes deeper. A handful of corporations control vast swaths of American industry, from media to agriculture to healthcare and tech. These corporations aren't just influencing a little bit of government policy, they're writing the policy. Politicians respond to donors and lobbyists, not constituents. Hell, there was a Princeton study which actually found that the preferences of American voters have a near zero statistical impact on whether a policy gets passed or not. But the preferences of economic elites, big businesses, and organized interest groups are strongly correlated with what policies.
We really see that with what's going on with the wars. Oh, and I dare say, I never heard that Canada was a problem before the Trump administration came along, and suddenly we're nasty and we're bad guys. That also kind of blows my mind. So Canada's become a thing, though I don't think any Americans asked for Canada to become a thing. Greenland, Venezuela, Iran. Oh, and now also Cuba. I think Cuba's probably going to be freed. And I think Cuba might be freed just before the midterms, so that a state of emergency can be called and the elections are canceled. We'll see. Prediction.
Statistical impact on whether a policy gets passed or not. But The preferences of economic elites, big businesses, and organized interest groups are strongly correlated with what policies actually get passed into law. In other words, your politicians don't care what you want, unless you're a billionaire. Elections are largely bought and paid for. Gerrymandering carves up districts so that the politicians can choose their voters rather than the other way around, like it should be in a free democracy. Voter suppression laws target communities least likely to vote for the people in power, and the two-party system has become a self-reinforcing trap that incentivizes extremism over representation. We are taught, and this is hardcore propaganda, that America's electoral system is the best. Well, except when our guy loses, of course. But there is a much better electoral.
You hear this too. America's not a democracy. It's a republic. Oh my God. Republic is a form of democracy. That's just insanity. And what is it? The electoral college? That's kind of a weird concept for anybody outside of the country. I'm not sure how many Americans actually understand it. Though Canada's election system is not perfect, far from it. But I think it's pretty representative.
System. It is called ranked choice voting. And the only people who prefer our current system over ranked choice are those who are financially incentivized against freedom and democracy. Here's how it works. With ranked choice, instead of picking just one candidate and hoping for the best, you rank out your preferences with your top choice at the top and your least choice at the bottom. If no one wins a majority, the candidate with the fewest votes gets eliminated, and the people who voted for them have those votes redistributed to their second choice. You keep going until someone actually has majority support. It rewards candidates who appeal broadly rather than those who energize the extremes. It reduces what's known as the spoiler effect and creates a better reflection of what voters actually want. There are already several US cities.
So the spoiler effect, if I'm not mistaken, is, for example, you'll have the Republicans and the Democrats, and they're both about 50-50. But then there's a candidate that comes out like Bernie Sanders, who pulls votes away from the Democrats. So the Democrats are now at 40 and the Republicans are at 50 and Bernie's at 10. Or RFK Jr. was a good example of that. So he was taking away votes from the Republicans, and that's why Donald Trump said, "Ooh, you know what? I'm going to have you as my, I don't know exactly what is, as his health and something." The irony, I can't believe I'm using RFK Jr. and the word health in the same sentence. Absolutely insane.
All right, so we're going to stop here today because the video goes on, and people's attention spans, I wouldn't even be able to watch a video that's this long. If you like the video, please click like, subscribe, share, comment, click on notifications, and comment if some of my perceptions line up with your perceptions or not. And thanks for comments. I really do appreciate them always. This is Pierre Shields for Canadian Shields. Go play outside.